afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Winningham with Madison County Economic Development Authority, and welcome to our second quarter HR Roundtable meeting. Before we get started, you should be aware that we have muted your microphones, but we have enabled the chat function in case you would like to use it. Questions and comments shared in the chat will be reviewed and directed to the appropriate person after the meeting concludes. We are recording this webinar, and we will post it along with answers to your questions on our website at MadisonCountyEDA.com. Each quarter, MCEDA invites HR directors, plant managers, and workforce partners from Madison County businesses and industries together to network, share best practices, provide resources, and collaborate to address Madison County industry needs. Our meeting today is a bit different from previous meetings since we are sheltering in place and social distancing. This will combat the rapid spread of COVID-19, which is causing major disruptions to businesses and communities across the world. Madison County businesses are feeling the weight of this health and economic crisis. It is extremely important now more than ever to connect, share, and work towards solutions. We are grateful that so many Madison County employers are joining the webinar. We know that you are here because the topic is very important to you and your employees and the future of your company. We are honored to have Jackie Turner, Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Employment Security, as our featured guest today. Jackie and her team have graciously agreed to provide an update and tell us what employers need to know about the unemployment process and benefits. After that, Jimmy Giles with the Central Mississippi Planning and Development District will join Jackie to address questions you submitted ahead of the webinar. Without further delay, let's welcome Jackie Turner. Thank you so much, Jackie, for joining us.
Thank you, Danielle. We appreciate you allowing us to be with you this afternoon, and I have with me my expert unemployment insurance director here, Timothy Rush, so we're so pleased to have him with us this afternoon. I am the Executive Director of Department of Employment Security, and Mr. Rush is the Director of what we call Reemployment Assistance Office, but it is the unemployment insurance program that Mr. Rush is in charge of. And we appreciate Jimmy being our facilitator today. Jimmy is a retired MDES employee and has a wealth of knowledge for unemployment insurance. So and in fact, he and the Central Mississippi staff have been helping us during this crisis. So I want to take this time to thank him and the staff there at CMPDD for helping us through this crisis. I wanted to take a few minutes to just take a brief few minutes to talk about what unemployment insurance is, about the executive order that we already have, and a couple of provisions of the CARES Act, and then we'll get right into the questions. Of course, unemployment insurance is a program that helps individuals out when they've lost their job through no fault of their own. And a couple of the conditions are being able and available and looking for work. Now, during this COVID-19 crisis, those things are a little bit difficult to do. So Governor Reeves signed an executive order waiving the 1-week waiting period for unemployment insurance here in Mississippi and suspending the work search requirements. And that allowed us to clear some paths that we knew would be a barrier as we move forward during the crisis. And waiving the 1-week waiting period allows people to draw an extra week of unemployment that they typically aren't allowed to draw during the normal times of unemployment insurance. We're hopeful that because we waived the 1-week waiting period, payment will get to those individuals quicker. That is most likely going to happen, but the real intent there was for people to be able to draw an extra week of unemployment. And on March 28th, Governor Reeves signed an agreement with Mississippi and USDOL, Department of Labor, enacting the unemployment provisions of the CARES Act, specifically in Section 2102, 2103, 2104, and 2105, 2106, and 2107. And of course, I know we all have the CARES Act out looking at it, but let me just run over just a couple of how that impacts unemployment insurance. Section 2102 of the CARES Act allows for pandemic unemployment assistance, and that's similar to disaster unemployment assistance. And that is for individuals who are not eligible for regular unemployment and a few other instances. So those are your 1099 type employees, independent contractors, and such like that may not be eligible for the regular unemployment, but because of the COVID-19 response, they will become eligible. And there are criteria listed specifically in there that you have to meet one of those criteria to be eligible under that section of the CARES Act. Another section of the CARES Act, specifically in 2104, provides that people who are already eligible for unemployment, beginning with the period with a Sunday that starts March 29th, the week ending April 4th, and for a very specific period of time from the week ending April 4th through July 31st, that if a person is eligible to draw unemployment under their state laws, then they will get an additional $600 per week during that time period. So that's one provision. And then there's another provision that's pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, and that allows individuals to draw for additional weeks, if eligible, past the 26 weeks in Mississippi that someone might be eligible for unemployment. So in total, that would be 39 weeks. So all of those are wonderful provisions that we are excited in Mississippi to implement. And of course, the tsunami hit us in Mississippi along with everyone else in the country. The economy was good, and when the economy's good, employment security agencies like us across the country we are funded at a lower level of staff and resources because the economy is good. So obviously, we all know we're all struggling everywhere. One day you're taking 1,000 claims, and the next you're taking 30,000. So I'm going to stop there as an overview, and we'll begin with Jimmy and myself and Mr. Rush with answering some of the questions. We appreciate your time today.
So before I start with the questions, I just want to give you a little insight, and this is from my background in unemployment insurance and with the Mississippi Department of Employment Security. I've been retired for almost 9 years now. I worked there through Katrina. Katrina was very, very difficult. I retired about 8 years after Katrina. We were still working through issues dealing with Katrina and unemployment insurance. This disaster pandemic is, I don't know how much times greater it is than Katrina. The legislative changes, those alone are huge, but then the volume is so much larger. And Katrina, we did have a little time to prepare simply because the infrastructure was gone and people couldn't call or file. So we had a little time to prepare and get ready for it. This, right or wrong, it hit overnight. And I want to give you an example. Let's say Nissan, I think they're on this call and I've been working with them some. Let's say Nissan makes 500 vehicles a day. They've been doing that for 10 years, nothing to it. They run 24/7. They got it down pat. And then I walk in and say, instead of 500, tomorrow I want you to build 1,000 cars. And the next day I walk in and say, instead of 1,000, we're going to 10,000 tomorrow. And the next day I say, oh, let's go to 20,000. And you have no choice in the matter. You have no workers. You have no trained workers. You're bringing in temps who do not understand unemployment insurance. It is extremely complicated, probably very similar to building a vehicle. So with that, just want y'all to understand the patience that's needed to deal with this situation. And really, I'm speaking from an outside voice. We volunteered to help Jackie and Employment Security. We have called in some of our staff. This is not a program that you can learn and work from home. These people are up here working, essentially risking their health, and they're getting nothing but their normal salary. They're working overtime, working much, much harder than in a normal sense, and they're doing it voluntarily. Jackie, and Mr. Rush, they have hired temps. These temps that they have brought in to assist with this are earning less than they would if they were drawing unemployment insurance with the 600 add-on. And again, they are risking their health to do this. From my perspective, and I've done unemployment and employment for a long time, in this calamity that we're in, healthcare is our priority. Sanitation is a huge priority, but unemployment insurance is right up there on the top. We have a third of Mississippians approximately out of work, and if we don't get money to them and get it in the economy, you can imagine what's going to happen next if there's no money to feed their families. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and I'm going to talk through these questions. I believe I'm going to address them to Mr. Rush. And if you could, Danielle, go to the next slide. I think you have the questions. Thank you. So what I'll do is we're going to go through each one. They're on the screen. I'll read them. And then, Timothy, if you will address them for us, please, in case people don't see the slides, okay?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, sir. When will people on unemployment in Mississippi begin receiving the extra $600 per week?
Well, let me answer it this way, Jenny. First of all, thank you for the opening statements that you made about the complexity and the enormous effort that we're having to make to address these issues. The $600, the programming, should I say, to program the system to get the $600 pay net is underway. I'm hoping the first payments will go out next week. It will be programmed, and for individuals who will be eligible, their first week of compensation would be for the week ending April the 4th. So if individuals have already filed and been compensated for week ending April the 4th, when they file their subsequent week, they should receive that additional $600 for the week that they haven't received it and they've already filed. So we're hoping that we can start that payment process next week.
All right. Thank you, sir. So next, how would a company communicate with unemployment once they reopen and they need their team members to return and stop filing for their unemployment benefits?
Well, there are several ways to do that. The easiest way to make sure that we address this timely, if they can log into our agency's website, which is www.mdes.ms.gov. And on the home page there, there is a section that says, I need a job, and then it says employers. And on that employer tab, that's drop down. And on those drop down, there's a selection that says report separation or refusal of work. So if the individual has been notified to come back to work by the employer and has not reported to work, then they can go into our system and notify us of that information. There's basically a template walkthrough fillable form that asks specific information about the employer, the contact number and name for the employer representative, the individual who they've tried to reach or who they've reached and have refused to return or failed to return back to work, and give us information in terms of the date that he or she was offered work and refused to return. And then we will create an issue for an investigator to contact that individual and determine the person's available to work, and if they have not provided good cause for refusing, then they will be denied benefits. Our first instructions will be that they need to contact the employer and return back to work, and if they fail to do that, then an investigation will be pursued. Jimmy, just want to make sure I'm coming across loud enough. I'm speaking to the phone, but I'll speak louder if it's not loud enough.
I'm hearing you fine. Danielle, are y'all hearing okay?
We are hearing you clearly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is really, Mr. Rush, along the same lines. Employer is asking, how will we get people to return to work when they're receiving the extra 600, similar to what I mentioned, that in some instances, people are going to be earning more money, or not earning more, receiving more money on unemployment than they would from a regular paycheck.
Well, from one perspective, individuals who are receiving the unemployment benefits, and including the additional $600, they are only eligible for benefits if there is no work available for them. So if there's work available for them and they are aware that that work exists, then they are not entitled to unemployment benefits. There are some exceptions to that in terms of the COVID requirements in regards to the CARES Act, where individuals who may not be available for work or able to work, who may be eligible for some pandemic unemployment assistance, but under Mississippi law and the federal law, that individuals who are able to work and who are available to work must return to work, and if they fail to return to work, they are not entitled to unemployment benefits.
All right, thank you, sir.
And they can specific reference to the PUA, referring to as Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, is under Section 2102 of the CARES Act. And there are a list of conditions whereby the individual could be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. But if those conditions are not met by that individual, then they are expected to return back to work. If the individual does refuse the work, as the law is that there are certain conditions whereby the refusal of work may be good cause. If the work offered is their normal occupation and they have the aptitude and ability and experience and education to perform that work, and do not have good cause in this case may be that something about the work is a detriment to their health or their safety, then it may be considered good cause for refusing the work. But if they're returning back to the same working conditions that existed before, more than likely good cause would not be as a result of conditions.
Oh, just a couple points that I'll make, and we're thinking about here. When we are closed, our folks are working, teleworking as they can. But when this lifts, and I don't know what form or fashion that may be, but I think it's incumbent on HR and leadership to think through how are we going to handle the various situations that are going to occur. There may be daycare centers that don't reopen, and people can't send their kids back to school. There may be schools that are not going to reopen, or what have you. All these things are going to happen. We may have people that were working in very tight confines, and they see this stuff is popping back up, and they don't want to return to that confine. So we all need to be thinking about how can we, again, better the conditions as we go forward. And again, I know in some instances, manufacturing mainly, where, you got to have them there and they got to do, and there are some things you can't do. But if there are other things to look at, we need to be prepared. And if this stuff pops back up, we've got to be ready to deal with it. So that's just a little what I've been thinking about here. So, all right, well, I'll move to the next question. I'm not sure if this is really unemployment related. Timothy, I'll see if you can answer it. It is, if a company has over 500 team members or employees, do we need to post the new EFMLA poster?
Yeah, Jimmy, that's not under MDES's jurisdiction, so I wouldn't feel comfortable giving an answer to that because we don't administer that program.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So this question, how do we handle hourly part-time employees during COVID-19?
Well, if the individuals are being given less hours to work or less days to work, those individuals would be eligible to file for benefits. And if the individual qualifies for regular benefits, the individual will be notified of that and certainly would be eligible between $30 and $235, which is what Mississippi pays for weekly benefit amount. There is a weekly allowance of $40 currently in place where an individual who is filing for benefits and working part-time may earn up to $40 and not be penalized for unemployment benefits, or their unemployment benefits not be reduced. Every dollar over 40 that they earn, that money is deducted from their unemployment benefits. And in some cases, they may have excessive earnings and they would not be entitled to benefits for that particular week. If the individual who is working part-time, they are required to report the earnings. If that individual earns over the allowed amount, in this case, you take the $235 plus $40, which would equal $275. So if a person is being paid more than $275, then that individual would not be eligible for partial unemployment benefits. If they don't qualify for regular benefits, in this case, monetarily speaking, they would be eligible for benefits, but if they have excessive earnings while they're filing, then those individuals will not be eligible for the $600. So if an individual is working part-time and have excessive earnings, and the CARES Act requires that they have to qualify for regular benefits and be entitled for benefits for that particular week that they're filing. So essentially, it boils down to the fact that if a person is working part-time and they have excessive earnings and they don't receive regular benefits, then they don't receive the additional $600. So a person could possibly earn or receive $1 from unemployment benefits because of the amount of earnings did not exceed, if the claim is a maximum claim, did not exceed the $275 amount. So therefore, they could receive $1 from unemployment benefits and then the additional $600. And that may be a combination of another question later on, but I thought I would address it at this point.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, this is a rather long one. So, is an employee that voluntarily quits employment because of concerns of contracting COVID-19 eligible for unemployment, and they have these additional qualifications associated with it? Specifically, if the employee's hours are not being reduced, there's no change in the working conditions or hours, the employee's work is still available, they're not being laid off, and the employee is not leaving for the reasons identified by the FFCRA, and the employer is taking all necessary actions they can to protect the employees.
So I think it goes a little bit back to the previous questions about individuals refusing to work. In this case, if there are no health risks involved and the conditions under which you refer to as FFCRA are not at issue here, then it's considered to be a voluntary quit. And very quit without good cause under the law, that person would not be entitled to benefits. So that individual would have a burden to show that the working conditions or the working conditions were a detriment to that individual. And under Mississippi law, it essentially said that, what would be the reasons that a prudent-minded person would quit his or her job when available work would be there. And so each case will be dealt with on an individual basis, but the CARES Act is not intended to be a free for all under no conditions. for unemployment benefits. So again, I refer back to Section 2102 of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Area program, where there are a number of things that conditions that should be met and reviewed to determine the person's eligible for benefits. And I don't know if I have time to go through all of those conditions or circumstances or not, but I would refer back to Section 2102 for those that may have more detail, need more about the conditions.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, now I think this one is, I'm going to reword it a little bit. Do unemployment recipients or claimants, when they are paid unemployment benefits, are they taxed on those benefits? And that's regular unemployment and the $600.
Yes, Mississippi unemployment is taxable, and so is this CARES Act benefits. It is taxable. Individual will have the choice to elect to have their taxes deducted when they file weekly, or they may elect not to do that and pay taxes when they file their annual return. But it is taxable, yes.
Okay. And Timothy, let me also, and again, I may have misinterpreted too, this could be concerning from the employer perspective as well, meaning are their tax rates going to be impacted from the individuals drawing the Mississippi unemployment and or that $600 unemployment addition?
From that perspective, currently it would be taxable for anybody who is filing for unemployment benefits if their benefits are as a result of a condition. If you would let me go back and say prior to COVID-19, if the conditions existed were by separation in case of a discharge, no misconduct is shown, or a lack of work is the case, then those charges would be levied against the employer under normal conditions. So yeah, taxes, the unemployment tax charges would be imposed in those conditions. If the individual does not qualify for regular benefits and they are eligible for PUA, pandemic unemployment assistance benefits, then the employer's account will not be charged because those funds are paid from the federal government and not charged against the state's trust fund. So Jimmy, if you would indulge me just a moment, try to imagine what the questions may be based upon my response, because I'm sure I have some other answers, but I don't want to take up all the time around this issue, but certainly it is important. So put yourself in the employer perspective and ask me another question if you think you need to probe me some more on that one.
So just to make sure I'm clear, if it's regular unemployment benefits and that employee is laid off temporarily, what have you, furloughed, whatever we want to call it, and they're receiving regular unemployment benefits, employer account is at this time chargeable for the regular unemployment.
Yes, of course, there may be an opportunity for future flexibility for the state to make decisions to waive that charge. Currently, that has not been waived. Okay.
But the additional, the $600, be it an addition to my regular benefits or out there because I'm not eligible for regular benefits, that is not chargeable to a Mississippi employee.
Yes, sir. That is correct. That is not chargeable against the employer's account. That's just federal funded and not imposed on the state trust fund.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. This one I don't know. Is there a deadline date when normal unemployment requirements will resume, looking for a job, etc.?
Currently, the governor's executive order does specify a sunset clause, I would suppose. It's through the 27th of June of 2020. So June 27th, 2020 is the date that the current executive order would resume work search activities and suspend the waiting period activity. So currently that is the date. It is subject again to the governor's discretion as to whether or not that will be extended, but currently that is the date, June 27, 2020.
Okay, thank you. If individuals do not qualify for the regular Mississippi unemployment benefits, how do they apply for the pandemic unemployment compensation as defined in the CARES Act?
The same process, Jimmy, that we have in place, and I'm speaking to Jimmy as he's my only audience, but apologize for the rest of you, to the rest of you. They could go online, and we encourage them to file online by visiting the agency's website and filing online. There is a question that will be asked if they are self-employed, and in addition to whether or not they are filing as a result of COVID-19. Currently, the system does not recognize a disaster declaration being in the programming. That's one of the things we're hoping we get programmed this week and be able to processing next week. So individuals who may be 1099 workers or self-employed workers who do not qualify for regular benefits, they should follow the same procedure that anyone else would follow filing a claim, keeping in mind that there aren't any wages in the system to establish a monetary claim, and therefore they will be issued notification that they don't qualify or they have what we refer to as an insufficient wage claim. Once the programming of our system is implemented, we will run a query to identify all of those individuals who filed as self-employed or having received a 1099 and don't have wages in the system, and send them notification that they may be eligible for unemployment benefits under the CARES Act, and ask them to provide or give them an opportunity to go back online and provide the wage information, such as the 1099 or earning statements, et cetera, for the period, calendar period of 2019. And I guess I could go further in detail, but maybe because of time I shouldn't. But I would say follow the same procedure that you would follow filing a regular claim, and expect that, or they should indicate that they were self-employed or issued a 1099 or something that effect. And then subsequently, they should be prepared to provide their wage information, 1099 for last year, any pay statements, earning statements that they would have used for filing their taxes, or maybe a tax return to show what they earned the previous year. And I know it's for some still tax season, they may have already filed their taxes, but the same information that you would provide to show what your earnings were for the calendar year 2019 would be what would be needed to show your earnings for self-employment taxes.
All right, thank you. All right, so how are individuals informed that they may qualify under the pandemic unemployment compensation?
Those individuals, if they file for benefits and they receive a notice that they don't qualify, we will then, using the same information they provided to us in terms of a mailing address, we will generate notification to them, mail it to them, or if they elected to receive correspondence via email, we will email them the notification may be eligible and that they should go back into the system and provide the information required. We're still working on the details of that notification and the required documentations, since we haven't received all the details from the department. We are moving forward under the guidance that we would follow if there was a disaster, and setting up our system on the same premise. So as soon as we get more detailed information, we'll be able to craft that notification. But we do plan to send those individuals either something by email or by mail, and it will be posted on our agency's webpage as well, and probably social media as well.
So if an individual is laid off in another state, but they live in Mississippi and they filed taxes in Mississippi in 2019, where should they file?
So if they're laid off in another state and they live in Mississippi, the general rule is if where did they earn their money, regardless as to where they file their taxes. So if a person lives in Mississippi and actually worked in Alabama and that's where their wages were paid, they should file their claim against Alabama. And if the employer ended up paying their wages into Mississippi's unemployment system, then they should file in Mississippi. They could go online and file the claim, and it will ask them what states did they work in the last 18 months and check those states. And the system itself normally would interact with other state systems to determine if they have wages in that state or those states to qualify for a claim. I do know that all of our unemployment systems around the nation are being taxed and strained, so it may not be a timely process right now. To my knowledge, Mississippi is responsive and timely responding to other states' requests. But the general rule is you file in the state or against the state for which you actually worked and earned your money, and not necessarily in the state where you reside.
All right. So are sole proprietors, self-employed Mississippi residents that have been impacted by the pandemic and the economic downturn, are they eligible for Mississippi unemployment as well as federal unemployment relief, or is it only just the federal relief?
It's the federal relief. They would not be eligible for Mississippi unemployment benefits because they have not paid into the unemployment trust fund for Mississippi. So any money paid to those individuals would be coming from the CARES Act funding. So it would be from the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program.
All right. Mr. Rush, I'm going to just read through this briefly. It's kind of a duplicate, but it may have a little bit of different twist to it, and I think you've answered it, but I may ask you some of it. If sole proprietors, self-employed, are eligible or may become eligible for Mississippi unemployment, and I believe you just answered that they would not be eligible for Mississippi unemployment, but then further down it asks what financial records or documentation are required for people seeking relief and during what terms. And I believe you answered that previously, that you need to see possibly their taxes from last year, their 1099s from last year, but you may want to expound on that a little more.
Yeah, that's right, Jimmy. Those individuals would not be eligible for unemployment benefits if all of their work in the last 18 months, in this case, either from October of 2019 through September 2000, October 2018 through September 2019. And I say that because the quarter changed this past Sunday. So individuals who may have filed or may be unemployed as a self-employed worker prior to this week could be eligible for PUA assistance. So as a rule of thumb, providing wage information for the period of October of 2018 through December 31st of 2019 to be a catch-all. So if they have wages, maybe they work for covered employment part-time and they work part-time as self-employed, they certainly may have wages in the system. And if they have enough wages to qualify with their other covered employment, then they would qualify for a Mississippi claim. It may be a small amount, but that would monetarily find them eligible. If they do not have any wages during the last 18 months of covered employment in the unemployment system in Mississippi, and all of their employment as a result of being self-employed, they would not qualify for regular UI benefits. However, they may very well qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance. And yes, they would need to provide some proof of that, financial records, documentations, 1099s, in some cases contractual obligations where they had a contract and they have proof that they were a drawdown or bank statements or something of that nature showing what their income was.
All right, very good. If people want to apply for both state and federal, I guess this is for federal unemployment, or only federal unemployment if ineligible for state unemployment, do they need to apply by completing the form available on the MDES website? And then further, does this same application submit the request for both types of relief, or is there more than one application needed?
Yes, it's not. It's the same process online, the same application they would file online is all that's required. There would be no need for them to submit another application. However, I want to reemphasize at this point in time, our system hasn't been fully programmed or modified to take those claims for the PUA assistance. If the individual can wait, I would say next week, without holding me to a date, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, and check back in online or check our webpage to see if the programming has been made. That way, they would only have to go into the system one time and provide that information at that time. Asking them for basic information such as their name, social security number, business account number, address, wage information, and then conditions whereby they may not be, whereby they are unemployed as a result of COVID-19. They will have to give some detailed information, but there is no need to file a separate process or paper claim or anything else of that nature, even call the contact center. So yes, that one application process will get them started, get them in the system. They can set up their username and profile and move forward that time. If they decide to wait next week, that would be helpful for both the agency and the individual, rather than the individual having to come back and provide additional information. And if they qualify, then when the benefits are determined to be payable to them, then they'll be paid any back weeks that they're entitled to in that first payment or subsequent payment. Okay,
Timothy, let me ask you this real quick just to make sure we're clear. So when you're asking for folks to wait, you're talking specifically about those that are self-employed or are sole proprietorship. If you're saying wait till next Tuesday or so, is that correct?
Yes, those who are self-employed, those who are issued 1099s, those who are not eligible for regular unemployment benefits. So yes, for the pandemic unemployment assistance. So I think it was a twofold question, Jimmy, as I understood it.
Yes.
In terms of applying for both state and federal benefits. So if you don't qualify for state, you may be eligible for federal. And right now, we're still programming our system to be able to accommodate a one-time service experience with the federal program for PUA. So those are the individuals I'm talking about to wait. But anybody else, we encourage them to go online and file.
Okay, and one other that may kind of fall behind that, another question is, okay, I'm waiting, but I've been off work 3 or 4 weeks now. Will I receive this pandemic PUA, pandemic unemployment assistance for those back weeks?
Yes, that they will be, if otherwise eligible, and it's always an otherwise, with circumstances that are not the same for everybody. But yes, that weeks that they're entitled to will be made available for them. I didn't address this earlier, but I think it's a good point. Time at this conversation is that benefits are usually submitted to the person via debit card. So whether it's regular benefits or the benefits they may receive under the CARES Act, once the claim is filed and they qualify monetarily and otherwise, they will be issued a debit card at the address of record. And therefore, it's important that when they go online, they give us the correct information because the debit card would be mailed to that address. And if they file the weekly certifications and they haven't received the federal money that they're entitled to, continue filing. Our computer system will be programmed to go back and identify those individuals who have not been paid the weeks that they should have been paid, and then we'll get them caught up and then keep caught up going forward.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. And let me just say just a little bit more about the weekly certification. I think it's important for both the worker and the employer. If the employee community could help us with this, it would be a tremendous benefit for both them, the employees, and the agency. We've seen cases where individuals who've completed their claim, their initial claim, been set up, and they haven't filed their weekly certifications. So weekly certifications is the process by which they go into the system, not the employer, but the individual who filed the claim, and answers essentially 5 questions. And once they've completed those questions and submit that information, they will get a notice that your certification has been submitted. One of the things that the executive order of the governor did was waive the work search requirements. Under regular benefits, individual must look for work and actively seek work. The governor has suspended that. Therefore, it's limited to 5 questions in terms of he or her being able to work, refusing any work, available for work, did they do any work, and so do they have a return to work date. That must be completed weekly. That's the process that they must follow each week in order to receive money on their debit card. The time period for which they may file their weekly certification is anytime 12:01 a.m. Sunday morning and thereafter for the previous week. So the week starts Sunday and goes through Saturday. So anytime after Saturday midnight, they can file for the week that had just ended. They would have until Saturday of the next week. I suggest they go in on Sunday sometime and file. And we're seeing that a large number of people who are filing on Sunday actually have their money on the debit card as early as Monday. So I thought I'd better say that before we end it.
Okay, good deal. And we have one last question, I believe. And I'm going to modify this one just slightly. The question was specific, asking how if a sole proprietor was denied unemployment, how would they appeal it? What's the process there, and what to do to prepare? But Timothy, I think you may want to address that for both sole proprietors and just regular employees or regular claimants that have filed for unemployment as well.
Yes, that's a good point, Jimmy. The process is the initial process is the same. They can file an appeal once they receive a decision, or if they receive a decision saying they don't qualify. There will be instructions on that notification as to how they can file the appeal, and usually there is a hearing officer, administrative law judge that hears those cases individually and makes a decision. For the employer community and for those who are self-employed, one thing that's different from the regular appeal process, once the ALJ, the administrative law judge, makes their decision, if it's for the federal compensation of the PUA benefits, the appeal goes then to the regional office. If it's for regular benefits and the ALJ makes a decision denying benefits or allowing benefits for the worker and the employer disagrees with it, they can file to the agency's board of review. If the appeal is for the federal benefits, those appeals go from the ALJ. The next level of appeal goes to the regional office of the Department of Labor.
All right. Very good. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you to Jackie, Timothy, and Jimmy for providing valuable information about how employers can help their employees. We really appreciate you all for attending. Thank you to those who submitted questions ahead of the webinar today. We hope that this was helpful to you. As a reminder, if you asked a question during the webinar, we will address those questions on our website at a later date. We truly appreciate all attendees for joining us today for MCEDA's second quarter HR Roundtable. With that, we will conclude this meeting. We hope that you and your families are well during this time.